We live in a world obsessed with validation. Every scroll, every swipe, every post, it's all calibrated to get someone else to say, "You matter." We chase attention, we beg for recognition, and we lose ourselves in the process. And yet the irony is that the people we admire most, the ones we say we want to be like, are rarely the ones begging to be seen. They're the ones who are so clear in who they are that the world can't help but notice them. Desperation is the result of confusion. Confusion about who we are, what we value, and why we do what we do. When we don't have clarity, we chase. We run after relationships, status, opportunities, hoping something or someone outside of us will finally fill the space inside of us that feels empty. But that space isn't filled by attention, it's filled by alignment. Clarity is one of the most powerful forces a person can possess. Clarity doesn't scream, clarity doesn't chase, clarity walks into a room and doesn't need to say much because its presence speaks volumes. Think about the people you've met who have real clarity. They aren't trying to convince anyone of their worth. They're not desperate for likes, for applause, or for permission. They are grounded. You can feel it in the way they speak, the way they move, and most of all, the way they choose. Because clarity breeds intentionality. When you know who you are, you stop chasing people who don't value you. You stop begging for seats at tables that weren't built for you. You start building your own table. And the people who are meant for you will find their way there, not because you shouted the loudest, but because your clarity acted like a beacon. That's the power of becoming so grounded in your purpose that you no longer need to run after things that used to drain you. Most people don't chase because they're weak. They chase because they've never been taught how powerful stillness can be. They believe movement equals momentum. But what good is movement if it's taking you in the wrong direction? Clarity saves you from wasting time. It saves you from fighting for approval from people who wouldn't recognize your value no matter how loudly you screamed. It allows you to walk away, not because you're bitter, but because you're better aligned with yourself. Let me be clear. Clarity isn't arrogance. It's not about thinking you're better than everyone else. It's about being better than your past self. It's about refusing to compromise your values for temporary validation. It's about understanding that when you stop chasing, you give space for what's right to catch up to you. Desperation makes us perform. Clarity allows us to be. That difference may seem subtle, but it changes everything. When you're desperate, you morph into whatever you think the world wants you to be. You dilute yourself to be accepted. You edit your soul to fit into rooms that were never meant for the real you. And you pay a heavy price because pretending is exhausting. Clarity gives you permission to stop pretending, to show up as you are, knowing that who you are is enough for the places and people that matter. And clarity isn't something you find in a day, it's forged in the quiet. It's earned through reflection, through saying no when it would have been easier to say yes. Through asking yourself the hard questions. What do I really want? What am I willing to walk away from? What am I no longer willing to tolerate? Clarity requires courage. Because once you know, you can't unknow. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Most people don't lack opportunity, they lack clarity. They say yes to everything because they're afraid of missing out. But the truth is, when you say yes to the wrong things, you're saying no to the right ones. Clarity is what allows you to choose well. It gives you the strength to walk away, not as a statement of superiority, but as an act of self-respect. You don't need to chase when you understand your worth. You don't need to beg when you know what you bring. And you certainly don't need to stay in places where you're tolerated, not celebrated. Clarity teaches you the difference. It teaches you that your energy is precious, that your time is sacred, that who you let into your life and what you give your attention to should never be random. They should be chosen. And here's the most beautiful part. Once you become clear on who you are, you naturally become unreachable to everything that no longer serves you. Not because you're better than it, but because you've outgrown it. Drama can't find you because you're not tuned into that frequency. Toxic people can't manipulate you because you know your boundaries. You don't need to prove your value because you're busy living it. That's what clarity does. It sets you free from the need to be understood by everyone because you finally understand yourself. So no, don't chase. Don't beg, not because you don't care, but because you care enough about yourself to stop settling. And in that stillness, in that quiet, in that deep, unwavering sense of self, something incredible happens. If you stop asking the world to recognize you and you become the kind of person the world can't ignore, that's the shift. That's the power. And that's what clarity gives you. You spend a lot of time trying to be liked, to fit in, to be accepted. Most of us are conditioned from an early age to adjust ourselves to avoid rejection. And the truth is, in that attempt to fit in, we start bending. A little here, a little there. We loosen our standards, not all at once, but gradually in moments where we feel being accepted is more important than being authentic. And before we know it, we've become someone we don't fully recognize, chasing approval from people who don't even know who we really are. But something shifts the moment you decide you're no longer going to live for external validation. The moment you stop lowering your standards just to be included in rooms that aren't aligned with your values, because their standards aren't walls that keep people out, they're filters that make sure only the right ones get in. You've probably felt it before, that quiet, unshakable respect you feel for someone who doesn't compromise who they are. Someone who doesn't chase attention but still gets it. Someone who doesn't adjust their values to match the crowd, but instead holds them with quiet confidence. What is that? Why are we drawn to those people? It's not the flash, it's not charisma, it's not volume, it's their standards. It's their refusal to settle. It's their clarity of who they are, what they will tolerate, and what they will not. That's what attracts us. Not because they're perfect, but because they're consistent. Because there's strength in self-respect. Because deep down we all crave certainty, and people with standards are certain about themselves. Here's what happens when you live with low standards. You attract chaos. You attract people who don't value you, opportunities that exploit you, and relationships that drain you. Why? Because you're signaling that you're willing to accept less than you deserve. Desperation is a broadcast. It tells the world you don't believe you're enough, and so you're willing to compromise anything to be chosen. But people don't respect desperation. They may respond to it for a moment, but they never stay. Because when someone doesn't respect themselves, others find it hard to respect them too. It's not about being cold, it's not about being superior, it's about self-honor. And people who honor themselves draw different energy into their lives. They don't need to convince anyone of their worth because they've already done the work of believing it themselves. That belief is magnetic. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It whispers. And the right people lean in. But you know what else happens when you raise your standards? You lose people. And that's a good thing. Because some people were only around because your boundaries were too loose, your expectations too soft. When you finally decide to raise the bar, those who are taking advantage of your flexibility fall away. Not because you pushed them, but because they were never meant to rise with you in the first place. And that's the price of self-respect. It costs comfort. It costs approval. But what you get in return is far more valuable. Peace, integrity, a life that feels like your own, not a role you're performing. Standards create that. They shape your identity. They send a message, not just to others, but to yourself, that you are not available for less than you deserve. Think about any healthy relationship you admire, personal or professional. At the core, it's not about perfection, it's about mutual respect. And mutual respect can't exist without clear standards. When you show people how to treat you by how you treat yourself, you stop needing to beg for basic decency. It becomes the baseline, not a bonus. You stop having to ask for loyalty, honesty, or effort because people know that without those, they lose access to you. We've confused availability with value. We think that being constantly accessible, always saying yes, never pushing back, is the way to be loved. But what if it's the opposite? What if the most valuable people are the ones who guard their time, who don't bend their principles for convenience, who know what they bring to the table and won't settle for anything less than reciprocity? That kind of person doesn't need to chase, they don't need to convince, they attract what's aligned because their standards have become their signal, and those who recognize it, who resonate with it, will meet them at that level. That's the difference between desperation and dignity. Desperation is loud. It needs to be seen. Dignity is quiet. It chooses to be still. Desperation says, please notice me. Dignity says, I see myself clearly. That's enough. Desperation compromises to be liked. Dignity risks being misunderstood to stay in integrity. We all get to choose which one we operate from. Every boundary we enforce, every no we say, every time we walk away from something that doesn't align, we're declaring our value. And with each choice, we either reinforce our standards or we dilute them. It's not always easy. There will be moments where the old version of you, the one who just wanted to be liked, will try to make a comeback. It'll tell you that being firm is being difficult, that saying no is selfish, that expecting more makes you high maintenance. But here's the truth. It's not high maintenance to have standards. It's low respect to have none. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. And when your tolerance is rooted in fear, you'll settle for crumbs. But when it's rooted in self-worth, you'll wait for the feast. You'll stop knocking on closed doors. You'll stop explaining your value to people committed to misunderstanding you. You'll stop shrinking to fit into places you've already outgrown. And in that decision, something shifts. The noise fades. The pretending stops, and you begin to live in alignment, not with what others expect, but with what your soul knows is right. That's the power of standards. They don't isolate you, they elevate you. They don't make you unreachable in a selfish way. They make you unreachable to anything that would ask you to sacrifice your worth. That's not arrogance, that's evolution. And it's available to anyone who's willing to stop begging and start becoming. We live in a world obsessed with outcomes. Everyone wants to get something. Get rich, get noticed, get loved, get ahead. The conversation almost always revolves around results. And the question we've been conditioned to ask is, what can I get from this? Whether it's a job, a relationship, or an opportunity, the mindset is transactional. We assess worth by what we gain. But there's a better question, a deeper question. Who am I becoming in this process? Because the truth is, getting doesn't sustain us. Getting creates a temporary high. Becoming transforms us. Getting is about taking. Becoming is about growing. One fades, the other builds. And if you look closely at the people who seem to live with the most meaning, the most depth, the most quiet confidence, they're not focused on chasing things. They're focused on becoming something greater than they were yesterday. There's something profoundly powerful about letting go of the need to constantly acquire and instead leaning into the desire to evolve. When you're obsessed with getting, you chase. When you're committed to becoming, you attract. The difference isn't in ambition, it's in direction. One is externally fueled, the other is internally led. You see, people often think the goal is to have money, have followers, have prestige, but what's the point of having more if you're not becoming more? If your identity is still tied to insecurity, fear, or self-doubt, no amount of success will make you feel safe. That's why you see people with all the things the world calls success still struggling, still lost, still empty. Because they got everything except themselves. The most powerful shift you can make is to stop asking, how do I get what I want? And start asking, how do I become the kind of person for whom this is natural? Instead of asking, how do I get respect? Ask, am I someone who lives with integrity? Instead of asking, how do I get love? Ask, am I someone who loves deeply, authentically, and without games? When you become what you seek, it starts to seek you. Both is magnetic. It may not be loud, but it's unmistakable. There's a quiet pull around someone who's doing the inner work. You don't need to chase people down when you carry that kind of presence. They come to you, not because you begged, not because you performed, but because you've become someone who radiates alignment. And alignment is rare, but here's the thing most people miss. Becoming is harder than getting. It takes time, it takes patience. It requires you to look in the mirror, not the scoreboard. Because becoming isn't visible right away. It doesn't always show up in likes or applause. It shows up in how you respond when life tests you. in how you treat people when you have nothing to gain, in what you choose when nobody's watching. But becoming is about building a foundation. And foundations aren't sexy, they're not glamorous, they're built quietly, consistently, and often painfully, but without them, anything you get is unstable. If your confidence is built on praise, it will crumble with criticism. If your peace is built on someone staying, it will disappear when they leave. Becoming creates roots. It gives you something solid to stand on even when life gets shaky. And it's important to understand becoming isn't about perfection, it's about presence. It's about progress. It's about waking up and deciding that who you were yesterday is no longer the ceiling for who you can be today. That your past is not your prison. That your value isn't something you earn, it's something you realize. People often say, I'll be confident when I get the job, when I get the relationship, when I get the money. But that's backwards. True confidence comes before the outcome. It comes from knowing that no matter what happens, you're becoming someone who can handle it, who can rise, who can grow. That's the confidence no one can give you and no one can take away. If you're always focused on what's next, you miss the power of what's now. And becoming only happens in the now. In the discipline you build today, in the character you choose today, in the small, repeated choices that slowly shape your identity. And when you commit to that, really commit, something incredible begins to happen. You stop looking around and you start looking within. You stop asking the world to reward you and you start asking yourself to respect you. And you realize something profound. The most valuable things can't be chased. They must be embodied. Peace, self-worth, confidence, love. You don't find these things outside of you. You become someone who lives them. You don't get peace. You become peaceful. You don't get love. You become love. You don't get self-worth. You realize you were always worthy, and you live from that truth. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to get and start focusing on becoming, and you'll begin to receive more than you ever imagined. Not because you demanded it, not because you performed for it, but because the universe responds to alignment, because people trust what is real, because excellence can't be faked and growth can't be hidden. So stop chasing, stop begging, stop bargaining with the world to see you. Instead, become someone you are proud to see. Someone your younger self would admire, someone your future self will thank. Let the goal be evolution, not attention. Let the reward be integrity, not applause. Because when you become someone grounded in purpose, guided by values, and shaped by growth, you become unreachable. Not because you're distant, but because you're no longer accessible to anything that asks you to betray who you truly are. That is the power of becoming. And that is the person the world needs more of. Not someone who has everything, but someone who is something. There's a misconception that runs deep in our culture. The idea that detachment means indifference. That if you're not reactive, if you're not visibly emotional, if you're not fighting to hold on to something, then you must not care. But that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, sometimes the greatest sign of care is the ability to let go, to release, to walk away, not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. We are taught to hold on. We hold on to people who no longer respect us. We hold on to jobs that no longer challenge us. We hold on to identities we've outgrown, relationships that drain us, and dreams that were never truly ours to begin with. Why? Because we believe letting go is failure. That if we don't fight for it, we must not value it. But detachment isn't about not caring. It's about caring enough to choose peace over chaos. Alignment over attachment. Emotional detachment is the discipline of staying true to yourself even when everything around you is begging for a reaction. It's the refusal to get caught in someone else's storm. It's not the absence of feeling, it's the mastery of it. Because when you're emotionally reactive, you're not leading yourself. Your emotions are leading you, and emotional leadership is the beginning of freedom. There's a quiet strength in the person who knows when to engage and when to step back, who knows when to speak and when silence says more, who doesn't feel the need to prove their worth in every room they enter. that person isn't cold, that person is clear. They've come to understand that not everything deserves their energy. Not every conflict deserves their participation, and not every person deserves access to their emotions. Emotional detachment allows you to pause before responding. It gives you space to ask better questions. Is this worth my energy? Am I reacting from ego, or is responding from values? Is this a moment to assert myself, or a moment to step away with grace? Most people don't stop to ask those questions. They get triggered, they react, they spiral, and then they wonder why life feels so noisy, why relationships feel so fragile, and why peace is always just out of reach. We think we need to chase peace by fixing everything and everyone. But peace isn't something you chase, it's something you protect. And sometimes the only way to protect it is to detach from what threatens it, not with hostility, but with honesty. And that honesty starts with yourself. Emotional detachment requires you to be honest about where you've become too available, where you've overinvested, where you've mistaken chaos for passion, drama for meaning, and familiarity for connection. Because sometimes we're not holding on out of love, we're holding on out of habit. And habits can become cages. It takes courage to detach from something you once begged for. To say this no longer serves me, even when it once defined you. To step out of the role you played for so long and trust that who you're becoming is worth the discomfort of leaving behind what you've outgrown. That's not coldness, that's evolution. It's easy to assume that emotional detachment is about shutting down, building walls, being unbothered by everything. But real detachment is actually the opposite. It's rooted in awareness. It's knowing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. It's the ability to fully feel something without letting it control you. To love someone deeply without losing yourself. To be disappointed without collapsing. To face rejection without questioning your worth. We all know people who are constantly in emotional chaos. Every conversation is high stakes. Every moment is dramatic. Every slight is personal. These people are not bad, they're just overwhelmed. They haven't yet learned the art of detachment. They think being reactive is being real. But reaction without reflection is just noise. The most powerful people in the world are not the loudest, they are the clearest. They are the ones who can sit in discomfort without immediately escaping it. The ones who can hear criticism without internalizing it. The ones who can let go of things they once thought they couldn't live without because they've realized that the only thing they truly need is alignment. Emotional detachment gives you the power to say, I don't need this to define me. I don't need this to complete me. I don't need to grip so tightly because I trust myself to handle what's next. And that trust is what creates freedom. Because freedom isn't about having everything go your way. It's about not being thrown off course when it doesn't. There's a moment in life where you realize you spent so much energy trying to hold everything together. Relationships, reputations, expectations. And you finally ask yourself, what if I just let go? What if I stop fighting to be seen, heard, understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding me? And in that moment, you begin to reclaim yourself. You reclaim your peace. You reclaim your energy. You reclaim your power. And suddenly, you're no longer controlled by the need to react. You're guided by the decision to respond, to move intentionally, to love from wholeness, not from emptiness. This is what makes you unreachable. Not because you're emotionally unavailable, but because you're emotionally sovereign. Because you're no longer accessible to the things that once destabilized you. You're not avoiding, you're discerning. You're not bitter, you're better aligned. Emotional detachment is the skill of choosing your battles, protecting your peace, and living with purpose. It's not a wall that keeps people out. It's a boundary that keeps you centered. And when you live from that center, when you're not constantly pulled by other people's opinions, moods, or expectations, you begin to lead your life instead of reacting to it. And isn't that what we all want? Not to escape emotions,